Well, hello everybody. Hello, Bettina. How are you?
Hi, Eric. Hi, everyone. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really good.
That's good.
I was working outside before the show. Usually on Fridays, I take Fridays as kind of like a personal day almost until I do this show, and then oftentimes I work at the restaurant at nighttime. But I had a client who needed work done on her house, and she was only available on Fridays, and so kind of went out and got my body moving, and I feel good. I was a little bit worried about it, looking forward to it. I was like, oh, have I taken on too much? But got a good sleep, and I feel good. And it always feels good to like move your body, and I think it's always a reminder about balance. Sometimes when you're feeling like you've done too much, you're like, oh my goodness, I just want a day to do nothing. But then actually 4, 5, 6 hours and doing nothing, um, you're out of balance in the opposite direction.
I'm smiling because that thing of did I take on too much, and I'm just smiling to myself about the whole five thing and the time and energy and actually, I tend to talk about it in a more negative way, but it just hit me now. The positive side of that fiveness um, is learning how to balance and learning when to say, no, this is too much, and step back and do whatever else it is that you need to do. And how um, I think in the Enneagram, see here, I'm bringing up the Enneagram, but with the Enneagram, each of the different types um, has this strength that can be either a weakness or a strength. And when we develop it into a strength and shift the perception to the strength of that characteristic, um, we can be the inspiration for other people in that particular aspect of humanness. So all in that little conversation, boom, that hit me. So and I heard what you said, so that's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Bettina and I often laugh because we're both a five and on the Enneagram, and it might also be why we understand each other maybe just from the get go. Over time, it's been a long term relationship now, but yeah, we're a lot of the places where we come from when we express things. We very much have. I have very much of an understanding of what it is you're getting at or what you might be feeling, just because it's so personal for me too. Like it's very much the same structures and processes. And the Enneagram is so interesting. And when you run workshops on it, at your house or whenever you brought it up in our early days, I always find it fascinating. When you find somebody who's the same number as you, it's really quite interesting. There's a real kinship because the way that you process and the way that you feel things, and the way that you come to conclusions and the way that you come to your behaviors and you come to your perspectives, you can see a lot of yourself in the other. And I think that's always. Um, I was about to say, I stopped myself because I was about to say there's a little romance in that.
Yeah, no, there is. I think you're right. It's that whole idea of, we go through our lives wanting to be connected to people who get us.
Mm.
And so with the Enneagram, and it happens a lot in the workshops, is that, we start off, everybody's doing a little test to get an idea of what type they are. And then you could kind of go around the table and it's like, oh, I'm a 7 too, or I'm a 5 too, and like there's this excitement and this kind of, it's like falling in love, because it's like, you will get me, you will understand why I am the way I am. And whether they even understand the deeper sense of it, and the sort of background of why they are that way, and discovering the sort of things that cause them issues. um it's that whole idea is, you get me even in my weirdness and my not so consciousness. You will understand me because you are coming from the same place, on the healthy and the unhealthy, the conscious or the unconscious side of that type. So yeah, it is kind of like a romance. I don't know, enneomance, or how they say two guys, it's a bromance. So I'm trying to
Right.
figure out what it would be with the Enneagram. But yeah, it definitely is a way of connecting, but also being inspiring when you take it to that strength. So yeah.
Yeah. And I know that when you do work with couples and people who are having, usually they don't come when things are going great. They come when something's an issue. Um, but it so often you can if that's why I think it's so important to like learn about these personality tests, is because it can reveal so much, and it can lead the way to reconciliation on so many things, to really be able to understand the other. And I know that even being around you and Peter, you guys talk about it all the time about, well, this is why they do this, is because, well, he's a one, or, when he's feeling this way, he's this number. And it allows us to really see the other person. And I think, that's amazing. I mean, that's a couple levels deeper, but when people who don't know, and like myself, I didn't know for a long time, but you just have people who you connect with, and this whole term about soulmate, we just get each other and things like this. It can be like you because you're the same number, or because you're the same Myers-Briggs breakdown. And it feels all great, but then we kind of take it for granted. It can be years before we realize that there actually might be some underlying issues, or there might be some things that need to be discussed. But because we felt so comfortable, because we felt we matched with somebody who was very similar to us, or if we're having frustrations with somebody who processes information differently, it can be absolutely critical in just even introducing the concepts, even the rudimentary concepts of these things can really go a really long way into having somebody see another and understand what the other person's trying to get through their behavior. They're just going about it in a predictable way that their personality will do it every time from here to the end of time. And the sooner that we can see that, the sooner that we can get along and really see one another. And yeah, that does translate into intimacy and romance, which is really what we're all trying to feel anyways.
Yeah, it's really interesting because even for me, because it was Peter that actually introduced me to the Enneagram when we met. And so, of course, being the good 5 that I am, I studied the hell out of that. and subsequently, I have taken some courses with Russ Hudson, who's, for me, one of the foremost teachers of the Enneagram, and a 5, by the way.
The best number.
Which is probably why I think he's the best teacher. But it's all the little nuances of it, and the movement and the flow, and the understanding not only yourself as whatever type you are, but also being able to understand other people and understand the driving force behind their type. You can move from that place of frustration to a place of compassion and totally understand the other person. As in, I used to struggle a lot with anger, and a certain person in my life being having quite, I won't say being angry, because that's an identification, but really holding on to a lot of anger, and then sort of projecting it out and directing it in my direction. And it used to frustrate me, and it used to make me angry. I trigger my own anger. And when I discovered that they were a counterphobic 6, and that when they were expressing that anger outward, it was them basically saying, I can't cope. You see the vulnerability, and it's so much easier to have compassion for that vulnerability than it is for that forceful energy of anger. So, I mean, that alone was worth knowing about for me. But it has helped me with my relationship with Peter and my relationship with many people. If I recognize what type they are, then I can say, okay, I understand why he or she is doing this. Now I can come from that place of having compassion for those human frailties that come to the surface when we're feeling uncomfortable, or when we are not feeling that self-worth, and when we're feeling self-doubt, and all those things come up, and we go right to that unawareness of our type. So yeah, and I don't have to take it personally, right? Because it's very it's very much not about me, it's about the other person. So it is a big help, and it has, helped me to nurture and improve my relationships with probably everyone in my life. Just being able to understand where they're coming from and why. So yeah, it's a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, that example is so poignant. When you talk about dealing with that six, and when they get angry, it's actually them saying, I'm struggling to cope right now. Um, and being able to acknowledge that in them, not through them being able to communicate it directly because they don't even know in that moment, and they're too emotionally riled up to see through it. Um, but if you can respond in a loving way to them not being able to cope, just even acknowledging it in them and not reacting in turn with anger to their anger, uh, that's unbelievable. Like, that's an unbelievable acknowledgement and an unbelievable validation that person, and it can quell the situation um, in an instant, because the other person, oh my God, I'm actually seen, and I know deep down I really wasn't communicating what it was that was actually being triggered inside of me. Um, and something you said incredibly important there and critical is that you see their vulnerability. You see their vulnerability, that's it's such a crazy transformation when you have the information, and when you understand it, that when somebody's coming at you with anger, upset, frustration, aggressive energy, and you can see the vulnerability underneath it accurately, um, that it's beyond night and day. It's just the absolute other end of the polarity of what could happen in that engagement. It could spiral downwards, and you could uh, quite rightly get upset back. Don't treat me like this, don't talk to me like this, and then you start fighting about whatever proxy, and then you just spiral yourselves downwards, and just both of you end up feeling not heard or not seen. Like, the other person doesn't get you. Is this right for me? Why am I even here if this is what happens? And if this person's mean to me, it's crazy. But if you can see through it in that moment, and that right away, you can see their vulnerability. Oh, there's just so much opportunity for love, and you just feel love. It's like, oh my God, this person's hurting. um, and yes, in this moment they're activated, and they're not communicating at a level that's where we want it. But if I can take it there, I can be the leader. I can take this interaction, I can see through it, and I can see their vulnerability, and it's such a beautiful, fertile ground for love to be
Yeah.
expressed and to be felt.
Yeah, and I think that whole idea of sort of being the one to stop the derailment of the conversation in midstream and bringing it back to, what's the real point here? Like, what is the real issue here? Not, now we're going to turn it into a thing about whose family is worse than the other, and remember that thing that you did to me, and all those things that we stack up and we get like our arsenal, and we get it away, and then we bring it out and start flinging it when we get into a conflict, right? Because we don't know how else to feel better about ourselves or to find resolution. And that never finds resolution. It always ends up in a major mess. So yeah, it's just a different set of tools that you can use. I don't know. To me, it's just been so awesome. And it's just between that and A Course in Miracles, to me, that's all I need in life, as far as tools for living a happier, more peaceful, and loving life, is A Course in Miracles and the Enneagram. And I'm good to go, because between the two of those things, understanding and connecting with my loving presence, and and through the Enneagram, understanding and knowing when other people are in a call for love and not able to express love, and to be able to answer them with an expression of love through my own work with it.
Hmm.
What more do you need? What more do you need?
Yeah.
That's it for me. And it has been, for me, probably the two most important skills that I've learned through my journey of consciousness, spirituality, whatever you want to call it. Those are the two most important tools I have learned on, or pieces of, to my little kit that has helped me to really deepen and really, really, truly find that sense of peace, because everything else was just a stepping stone to this. And this gives me true and lasting peace and contentment, whereas everything else that is in the outer world is temporary, and it's too much hard work to change the world so that I feel better. I can change how I see the world, and that makes more sense to me, because that's really what has made the most dramatic shift in my life. Right? And I'm not saying everybody should jump on the bandwagon of A Course in Miracles and the Enneagram. I'm saying for me that was the thing, and for me the whole thing was to really have that deep sense of authenticity and integrity that comes from that loving presence and that sense of peace that you feel from the connection to loving presence. So whatever it is out there that helps you do that, then go with it,
Yeah, we'll find our, like, we all have our toolboxes, and we all have the ones that work best for us or helps us see life, from a place that works best for us, in a place of like love and peace, for sure. One thing I think that you said just so astutely there was that when you come across somebody who's communicating in a call for love as opposed to an expression of love, having that person be activated and be upset, it's their call for love, without being able to communicate it as an expression of love. And I think that's a really good distinction, because I do think that really does let us not take something personally when we're watching somebody else be activated, when somebody else is upset. And it's something that I definitely struggled with, especially in my romantic relationships earlier on in my life. And of course, it's still difficult, but learning these things, allowing myself to listen and to be present without taking things personally, was a huge, a wonderful thing that I learned in my life, and it made relationships just so much better. Not just romantically, but all of them. Being able to see another person's upset for what it is that they're going through in that moment. Some people won't say things that aren't a direct reflection of how they're feeling in a moment, and you can be a trigger, or they can call you out as a trigger for it, but you don't have to participate. You can sit there and you can listen, and you can keep that distance, especially when you know that they're communicating from a call for love, in that moment. And it really allows you to really respond much more appropriately, and much more in a way where you don't get triggered into a downward spiral, and so much more in a way that you can just receive them, and you can just send out the vibes of love and peace, acceptance, and really look to hear them, which is really what they want, which is really what I want when I'm upset. Is I don't need somebody to make solutions for me, or to tell me, or to dissect my thinking. Just want to feel really heard and validated, and not judged, and accepted at the end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you. Like, it's been a struggle for me too, because it's like, well, I'm the expert, not I could really help you with this.
I still fall prey to that.
If you just listen to me, like, I know how this can be fixed. But I've really come to realize that people don't want you to fix it for them. People want to be heard. People want to know, don't want to feel like they're broken. And when we try to fix someone, it's, it induces that feeling of, oh, I must be broken if you're trying to fix me. And no one wants to feel like they're broken. And the thing is, nobody is broken. they are, having mistaken beliefs, and even if they are having mistaken beliefs, they're going to have those mistaken beliefs until they're ready to not have those mistaken beliefs anymore. And nothing you say or do is going to make them have them faster or make them
Yeah.
feel better or change the way that they are seeing things in this moment. When someone is standing there screaming and yelling and having a temper tantrum and telling you off and tearing you apart, and you sit there and you do take it personally, and you start coming back at them in that same way because their call for love is being met with your call for love, there is going to be a downward spiral. If someone is yelling and screaming at you like that, that is, as much as you don't want to see that that's what it is, that is a call for love. And if you can step back into that loving presence and recognize it and answer with an expression of love, whatever you feel moved to do in that moment as an expression of love, just holding that loving space for them or hearing what they have to say without saying, oh yes, you're right, you should get vengeance and attack. That's not an expression of love. But just to be able to hear them and say, I really do understand what you're saying and what you're going through, and I totally trust that you'll find your way through it. Sometimes people want to know it's going to be okay, but they want to know it's going to be okay because they'll be able to cope. And so answering with that expression of love is, for me, the best way to deal with those kind of situations. And I have seen people shift because of it. And I have seen people, when given the space to figure it out for themselves, I've seen them figure it out for themselves and come away, letting go of some of the drama in their life and some of the creation of drama that happens when they're feeling that they cannot cope. So, yeah, it's tough though. It's tough not to take things personally because, when you're sitting there and you think you're being all that love and someone, walks in the door and their whole day gets dumped on you and you think, what the hell? It is sometimes difficult to go, oh yeah, that's right. They just need to know they're loved. And however I can express that to them is the best thing I can do for them right now. And people think that wanting to fix it for them is an expression of love, and I'm just saying it's not. It's not, because you're actually taking something away from that person. You're taking away their ability to go their own path and sort things out their own way. And a lot of times it's because we want to feel comfortable. When we want to fix things for something else, it's because we want to feel comfortable.
Yeah.
It's true.
Make it about our need. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, oh, I don't like them being this way. I need to fix them so I'll feel comfortable. And I think, sometimes people don't realize that's the dynamic that's happening, in that moment. But I think once we realize that, it's much easier to, again, move back into that loving presence and just be an expression of love when someone is in that state.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a real opportunity to lead, the interaction. And if two people and one person's activated, they're upset and they need your leadership in that moment, and it's your opportunity. And when you fail it and you get triggered into the spiral, I've done it both. And talking about romantic relationships, I've done it both ways, where I've done it wrong and I've gotten sucked in. And yeah, it always ends terribly. and you walk away, and it can be a turning point to blowing things up in a relationship, or both people walking away not feeling comfortable, and then that has long-term implications. And I've done it right, and that ratio is moving more in my favor the older I get. And when you do it right, that's some of the best sex you'll have afterwards. So
And it's magical. Like, I mean, the whole thing is magical. You go, oh my God, that was so amazing.
yeah,
Not
I
the
feel
sex,
so much better.
not the sex so much as just the whole interaction being totally different. And I mean, even Peter and I mean, yes, we have an amazing relationship, and yes, we are so good together, and so loving towards each other. But I mean, we've been together for together for 10 years, married for 9 years. And it's just in the last couple of years where the conflict is, that we're really learning how to work together, how to accept what each of us is going through, how not to take things personally, how to really see that call for love, and to not jump in and join that whole, like, I'm really pissed at you, well, I'm really pissed at you, and not that we've ever really gone to that place, but I mean, there was conflict. And the really amazing thing about it is that each time that would happen, we would come back to ourselves and learn something from the experience, and learn something about ourselves, a pattern, something from our past that is influencing what's happening in the present moment, and letting go of that so that the next time there was a trigger. And I'm not saying either of us don't get triggered at times, but we're now at that place where when we are, we deal with it totally differently. We skip this part at each other, and we immediately go into ourselves, and we can express that to each other. It's like, oh, this is what I'm feeling, and I'm feeling it because this thing in the past is still kind of dogging me, and I really need to look at that and realize it's different now. You are not that person. We are different in this relationship, and I don't need to go to that place anymore of being defensive, or going on the attack, or whatever it is, or expecting things and then being upset because my expectations were not met, or whatever it is. um, and yeah, just talking about it, I've just realized that lately it's just been so pleasant and wonderful. And it's not that one or the other of us is never going through stuff. We are, but our time together is just so relaxed and lovely, just lovely. Like, it's just, I just love spending time with you. I just love being with you. And I love the way we work together, and the conversations that we have. And but it took a lot of work. It took a lot of work before we got together. And it has taken a lot of work now that we've been together to get to that point. And the work has been on ourselves in the framework of the relationship. It's not working on each other. It's working on ourselves in the framework of the relationship, so that that relationship is so cherished and treasured, and we both enter into it really, really being the reflection of loving presence for each other. And it's interesting because when we got married, the vows I wrote were about being the beloved and seeing the reflection of the beloved in him. And I feel like that's where we're at now, is that we're in that space, and we're in that space pretty much most of the time, but not without some personal work. It didn't just, show up. It was, always being aware, always looking at our part in things, and always looking at why we feel certain ways about things. There's a lesson in Course in Miracles, which is, I'm not upset for the reason I think. It's one of my favorite lessons, because on that day that lesson would come up, I would spend all day looking at certain things that happened in experience and that triggered me, and go, I'm not upset for the reason I think. And it would help me stop and really look at what the upset was. It wasn't about the other person. It was about something I was feeling about myself and the way I was seeing myself. So yeah, it's so important to really look at those things and really understand where they're coming from, and become more present with your relationships and with yourself. That was kind of long-winded, sorry.
That's a great place to come from, and I know that it's been really useful when I've used it as a tool in my life when I'm feeling off, when I'm feeling something's wrong, and to ask myself right away, like, I'm not upset for the reason I think, and it's so true, and it's always true for me. I've done that so many times, and unfortunately, before I knew it, I would, you would just lash out because you're just throwing darts and trying to figure out, you know, well, maybe it's this, you know.
It's because you did this, or you are this.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then even if you get some resolution, it's like, fuck, I still feel it.
Yeah.
Fuck, maybe it's this, and you just next time you get triggered, and yeah, and then if you can sit that with that, and that be the one thing you ask yourself, or ask yourself to consider, is that I'm not upset for the reasons I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes you, because it also makes you do the work a little bit before you come to the place where you're trying to resolve some sort of conflict. It preps you in a way that I have a little bit more autonomy, rather than just throwing my feces at whoever's in front of me. And that's it's a better and sometimes you can avoid the whole thing altogether and be like, oh, this is reminding me of that thing 9 years ago that I hated so much. And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, that's not true. And much to the point that you brought up about patterns, when you get in this conversation, that, yeah, sometimes we can bring forward unresolved or wounded patterns from situations like this, but not exactly like this in the past. And that can really, that's not really honoring the current set of circumstances and the current set of people in your life.
Yeah.
Not giving them enough of benefit of the doubt, I think.
And the thing is, it can be stuff that's not even really your experience. In other words, it could be
Yeah.
generational. It could be like you watched your parents and how they interact, and you go, oh, I know what happens next. Well, no, you don't, because you're two totally different people, and that's not necessarily what's going to happen. And, I mean, you can say, oh, it's you, you did this, you did that, you did the other thing. And then they leave you, and the problems are still there. And that's when you realize, oh, it wasn't them after all. It's me. It's me. It's me. It is all about me. It really is, in the sense that if I want to be happy, I gotta make it happen. If I want to find peace, I gotta make it happen in here, inside, pointing in here. Not out in the world. It's not out in the world. It's never out in the world. It's always inside. It's an inside job. Happiness is an inside job. Somebody said that. I won't take credit, but somebody said that.
Somebody quite wise.
Yes.
And I'm sure it's been said so many ways,
Yes.
so many different ways. Yeah, same premise though.
Yeah.
But this was a really nice discussion. It also helps me take ownership too. It reminds me, it anchors me in a way of taking ownership. For both, when I'm on both sides of that, when I'm the one who's upset, and when I'm the one who's being called on to witness somebody else's upset.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we've gone over time, of course, and if you would finish the meditation, send us off in a peaceful way into our day, Bettina, I think that'd be beautiful.
I absolutely will. Let's close our eyes and take a deep breath inward, always directing our thoughts and our ideas and our feelings inward towards the center of our being, where we find the answers to all our upsets are, that's where we find them. In the wisdom and the knowledge that sits within us, in that loving presence. If we sit quietly in the stillness and wait for the noisy, rambunctious ego to settle, and in the background, beyond it, is the beautiful, loving, peaceful voice of loving presence that will remind us to be the expression of love, that will remind us that someone else's upset is a call for love, so that we can answer that call for love with an expression of love that, when it is expressed, touches not only the person directly it is directly sent to, but through the ripple effect, it will affect so many other people down the line. So many people ask how world peace can be achieved, and it truly is from within. And then the expression of love outwards, one person at a time. So remember to connect with that loving presence within you as often as possible. To go within to look for the answers to your own call for love, your own upsets, your own old patterns that push you in a direction that causes conflict, and know that these mistakes can be corrected, that these patterns can be changed, and that the voice that you listen to can be shifted from ego to loving presence in each and every moment of your day. And when you're ready, wiggle your fingers and your toes and bring yourself back to the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thanks everybody for joining us this week, and it's a pleasure to put the show on and just doing it.
It is. It's like just as much for me as it is for anybody else, because it helps keep me on the straight and narrow.
We'll see you all next week, everybody.
Have a great week, everyone.